Stephen Koprince, Managing Partner of Koprince Law, LLC. And I'm here to discuss some very exciting news for women-owned small businesses in federal government contracting. Effective October 14th, 2015, federal contracting officers now have the regulatory authority to issue sole source contracts to women-owned small businesses and economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. That's WOSBs and EDWOSBs for short. On October 14th, a new SBA regulation took effect. That regulation allows WOSBs and EDWOSBs to receive those sole source contracts. Now, under the new regulation, a WOSB or EDWOSB may be awarded a sole source contract of up to $4 million or up to $6.5 million for a manufacturing contract. But in either case, whether it's a sole source contract for $4 million or up to $6.5 million, three conditions must be met before the contracting officer can award that sole source contract. First, the WOSB or EDWOSB has to be what's called a responsible contractor under the FAR. Now, responsibility is a term of art under the FAR. It includes things like appropriate ethics, financial capability, and so on. Responsibility is not unique to sole source contracts. Any contractor has to be responsible in order to receive any type of federal contract. Check FAR 9.1 if you have more questions about responsibility. Second, the contracting officer must not have a reasonable expectation that two or more WOSBs or EDWOSBs will submit offers. Now, the second criteria may come as a surprise to some women-owned small businesses. There appears to be some misinformation floating around, suggesting that WOSBs and EDWOSBs can receive sole source contracts, notwithstanding the potential for competition for those contracts. Not so. Once again, in order to award a sole source contract under the SBA's new regulation, the contracting officer must not have a reasonable expectation that two or more WOSBs or EDWOSBs, as the case may be, will submit offers. In other words, sole sources are only allowed where a WOSB competition would be disallowed because the so-called Rule 2 would not be satisfied. Third, the award must be made at a fair and reasonable price. Again, that's the same for any type of government contract, whether it's sole source or competitive. The government has to pay a fair and reasonable price. As always, however, contracting officers do retain broad discretion to determine whether a price is fair and reasonable. Now, in addition to these three criteria, it's important to note that WOSB and EDWOSB sole sources are only authorized in those NAICS codes for which WOSB and EDWOSB set-asides are allowed. A list of those NAICS codes is available on the SBA's website. The SBA is currently engaged in the study to determine whether that list of NAICS codes might be expanded to include other industries. But for those who are not in those industries, it's important to note that WOSB sole sources are not allowed if WOSB set-asides would not be allowed. The SBA's regulation is all the authority that a federal contracting officer needs to issue a WOSB or EDWOSB sole source award. However, some contracting officers may shy away from such awards until the FAR is updated to include similar authority. Oftentimes, contracting officers are hesitant to use authority outside the FAR, even though that authority is perfectly good. WOSBs and EDWOSBs would be wise, in cases where sole source awards might be appropriate, to educate their contracting officers about this new authority and, if appropriate, lobby for a sole source award.